Please open the Tanakh. We're in Shmuel Bet and Perek Yud Chet, chapter 18. If you're using a Koren Tanakh, it's chapter 18. And Shmuel Bet is page 388. And just to refresh your memory of what we're talking about for those who maybe weren't able to be with us last week or who are just joining us more recently in this year, we're in the midst of the Mered Avshalom, the rebellion perpetrated by Avshalom. And the point that we left off was really in the middle of the chapter at one of the most graphic, sad, horrendous moments. I wanted to just not reframe it, but just to amplify one point. David HaMelech, who left Yerushalayim owing to the rebellion, his withdrawal, which some might argue was tactical, which it was. We saw different ways that it was certainly tactical, but also it was a feeling that whatever was coming to him, magia lo, he deserved whatever was happening to him on a certain cosmic level, that God was sending him these challenges as punishment for his actions. But by the time you get to chapter 18, he has an army of many thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of soldiers. And the purpose of these soldiers is basically to quell an insurrection whose initiator and whose main agitator happens to be the king's son. So to say it differently, a father gathered an army to stop his son from doing what his son was doing. And he gives this speech, page 388 in the Koren Tanakh. If you're looking in your own, it's the book of Samuel, 2 Samuel, Shmuel Bet, only 2 Samuel, Shmuel, part 2, verses 4 and 5 on the top of the page. He's really clear that even though all of these people are going to have to fight in a war because Avshalom has troops and it's very complicated and very challenging, nonetheless, go easy on my boy. La'at li lanar la'Avshalom. And it makes the text of the Tanakh goes out of its way to tell you, everybody heard when the king said this. It wasn't a mystery. It wasn't unknown, well known. Don't go after my son. Be nice to him, basically. You know, kid gloves, even though you're going to have to stop him. And that was the whole point of the war in the first place, was to stop this rebellion. What we saw last time was that or it's actually 2 sessions ago, and you can read it for yourself as I'm talking if you want to just sort of review for yourself. There was a great civil war that transpired. But the Navi wants you to know that most of the people who died, of the 20,000 people, it's an astronomical number of Jews who died fighting each other, was really on account of the natural circumstances, challenges, the forest, whether it was animals, whether it was the brambles, accidents. But it refers to it as a magefa, which usually would be called a plague. Well, in fact, this experience was a plague for the Jewish people, a terrible blight on everything that the Jewish people were supposed to be about. By the by, the focus then goes to Avshalom, and he's riding on a pered, on a mule. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. But the idea that he gets caught in an elah. Now, I made a mistake last class. I want to correct it. I made it sound as if an elah, aleph lamed hey, is the same thing as an alon, but it's actually not correct. It's not the same tree. The elah tree, we saw a picture of it last time. I'll put it up momentarily again. You could see what it looks like. It's not the same thing as an alon. Apparently, they're in the same family, but they're not the same. They're not the same. They're not the same. So it goes. Let's just look at the psukim of what happened with Avshalom. And that is, of course, Vayikare Avshalom, Pasuk Tet. Verse 9. Vayikare Avshalom, Lifnei Avdei David va'Avshalom, Rochev al hapered vayavo hapered tachat shovech ha'elah hagdola vayechazak rosho va'elah vayutan bein hashamayim u'bein haaretz ve'hapered asher tachtav avar. The mule kept on going, and he gets stuck. His head gets stuck. His hair gets stuck in these brambles, and he can't extricate himself. He's struggling. Against the backdrop of Pasuk Chet, verse 8, so it's of a kind with the fact that many people were having problems in the forest. It was treacherous to fight a war in the forest. And so here's another expression. In other words, it's not some kind of incredibly strange and wondrous thing that the tree reached out and grabbed him or something. It was happening to a lot of people. He was one of those people. Also note that Absalom is clearly on the battlefield. David is not on the battlefield, recalling that at the top of this page, 388, the Koren Tanakh, verse 3, Pasuk Gimel, the generals told David, don't go with us to the battlefield, because if something happens to you, then we're fighting for nothing. It'll be a lost cause, and Absalom will be the king, and that's it. We have to protect you, sire, and therefore you can't go out to battle, which is, of course, one more signal of David, who is much more withdrawn. Here others were telling him to be withdrawn, but he's much more withdrawn than he used to be from the way in which he was that valiant warrior out on the field, which tells us something. Okay, let's look together at some of the sources. We were looking at this last time, and we talked about the last thing we said. We're actually right over here. The last thing we had talked about is the unintended consequences of speech. We saw that Gemara Masechet Brachot, and I want to just sharpen the point in case it wasn't clear last time. No one should think that because David used, quote unquote, the wrong turn of phrase, therefore his son died. That's flipping it. The point is, now that his son died, are there hints to things that he said that we want to signal that were already sort of harbingers? They were a foreshadowing. They were a portent of what was to come. But when I say portent, I mean it lahavdol fe'avdol in the literary sense, not in the mystical sense that because he said leich bishlam, that's why his son died. It's not that way. But we saw that the turn of phrase here of a David with regard to Avshalom was just like the turn of phrase that David had used with regard to Achitophel. That Amarav Yehuda Amarav Kilal Chacham Afilu B'Chinam Hiba. If a wise person, if a sage, really, not just any wise person, but a sage curses, so even if they do it in a gratuitous manner, it will come true. Meaning there's a staying power to words, and the higher up the ranking one goes with the power of their words, whether it's because of their sagacity and of their righteousness and or their platform, so the more responsible they need to be, right? And what had David said to Achitophel? He'd asked a certain question, and he didn't get an answer. Anyone who knows the answer to this and doesn't give it to me, they will be strangled and in their neck, and they will die. What happened to Achitophel? In the end, sadly, he hung himself. So you have two times David said, and it came to be. Sort of the power of the tzaddik to speak, and it comes true. It's true halavai for brachas too. Again, in neither case can you say the reason why so-and-so died was because the Chacham said it that way. I think it's drawing too much of a causal link. But I think Chazal are signaling, look how careful a person has to be with their words in all circumstances. Okay, now, we'd also seen this idea that whereas the great tzaddikim are actually affecting both Shamayim and Aretz. The model or motif is Yaakov Avinu sleeps. He has a dream of a ladder connecting heaven and earth. So in the Medrash Tanchumi, Lamdeinu Rabbeinu, the students asked Rabbi Tanchum, what's the difference between the Mita, the death of Tzaddikim, and the death of Rishayim? So Rav Yusta Bar Shunam B'Shem Rabbi Yeshua the Sichlin said, Mitatan Shorashem Lo Ba'aretz Lo B'Shamayim. The people who are wicked, their death is neither in heaven nor is it on earth nor on heaven. It's somewhere suspended between the two. And what happened to Achitophel? He hung himself, right? We have Haman interposed in the middle here as another example, right? Not mentioned here, I note, is Avshalom. And I queried why that is. I still don't know. I tried to look it up. It doesn't mention. The next one is, then it goes to the death of tzaddikim is both, right? Right, the nefesh adonit sur b'tzor hachayim. Right, the death of my beloved one should be bound in the bond of everlasting life. And also the notion ba'aretz minayin so vayik beruhu b'malek yivrei David b'kavod aslav mitato. So the idea that there is a burial and an impact on high and down below, and a tzaddik dies, as opposed to a rush who's suspended between Shemaim and Aretz. Again, Avshalom is missing, but I wonder, because the next story after Achitophel dying by hanging is Avshalom almost dying by hanging and dying while he is hanging, as we will see in a moment. Someone wanted to say something? I feel like there's a hand up. Did I make that up? Karen, please, go ahead. Unmute. I don't hear you.
When you were talking about the hanging, I kept thinking of we're stiff-necked people. So there's some symbolism about the neck already, maybe?
Could be.
Okay, and then I had a question. Is it significant that he was on a mule? I mean, I sort of think of we're like a donkey people, and he was on a mule.
Yeah, it's very significant. I think it's very significant.
Okay.
We're coming to it.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I could just say the pered typically is the animal of choice of royalty.
Okay.
I have more to say on this. That's why I was kind of smiling. But the basic answer is, well, it's how the royalty travels around. So obviously he was riding on his high mule because he wanted to tell everybody he's the king, right? And he couldn't abide anyone thinking otherwise. He didn't go to the war with his crown on, with his father's crown on, but he did go riding a mule, like driving around in a Chevy Escalade or something. I don't know. What are the presidents and heads of state always drive around in those? You know what I'm talking about? Those large behemoth vehicles. So he wanted to look like the motorcade. So that's what he did. You know, that's how he dressed it. Okay. Hold on. I forgot to ask anyone else wanted to say anything. We're good? Yes? Okay, let's go. Then let's move to the next piece over here. Okay. So I wanted to show you just this little piece about the death of Achitophel. I know it seems like it's going backwards, but there's a method to my madness here. And that is in Eliyahu Rabbah, it describes that there was a command that Achitophel on his deathbed, the great counselor, gives to his own children. Amalan alti b'machloket leolam. Don't be in any kind of disagreement, a dispute, rather a dispute of the destructive kind. This Achitophel realizes on his deathbed, according to Chazal, we saw that Gemara previously. Don't rebel against the house of David. Which is interesting, by the way, because don't rebel against the house of David. Is that David or is that the house of David? And Avshalom is part of the house of David. So that's actually a little more ambiguous. But okay, now, David. Now you'll ask me, how did David hear what Achitophel said on his deathbed? The answer is, I don't know. He found out. Ruach HaKodesh is one idea. Someone told him is another idea. Third, Chazal made this up. They imagined this is what David would have said. I don't know which it is. I prefer door number one or door number two, but I could find someone saying to me, come on, this didn't actually happen this way. I don't know. But as soon as David heard about this, he came before Hashem and he bowed down, but he prostrated himself in such a way that he was lying completely flat on the ground. Amar, he davened. He said, Avisha v'Shemai, my Father in heaven, Yehi shimcha gadol mevorach leolam u'omei olamim. May your great name be blessed in all worlds, meaning forever and ever and ever. May you have, basically, we would say, nachas from the Jewish people. Korat ruach is a certain comfort, a feeling, a good feeling from the Jewish people, your servants rather, in all wherever they dwell. Shegidal tanu, v'kidash tanu, v'kilas tanu, v'ramam tanu, v'kashart lanu kashi b'divrei Torah m'sofa olam v'ad sofo. You magnified us, sanctified us, praised us, exalted us, and attached us to words of Torah for all time. And Karen, this is very nice. It goes with your stiff-necked people idea that you mentioned moments ago, right? Masim shanu asim enu hagulim lefanacha. These things that we are doing are not appropriate before you. We realize that. Shenamar al kain gadalta Hashem Elokim v'gomer. This part of the from chapter 7. Therefore you have done great, Hashem, my God. Elu maseh doeg hedomi v'achitofel giloni. These are the acts of Doeg, the Edomi, and Achitofel, the Giloni, are that which is the inappropriate thing, inappropriate actions, inappropriate behavior. What's this prayer? David, even though Achitofel has died, I think feels that he has a certain responsibility here as well. All right, it didn't. It might have started and been sourced in Doeg Edomi, stirring up the pot in his own time, the days of Shaul. Now Achitofel Giloni, stirring up things here in a hornet's nest and being the counselor to Avshalom. Remember, he told Avshalom to have that terrible violation of the 10 concubines of the king on the roof of the palace. So nonetheless, you have the idea of David HaMelech, and you can imagine at a very tense time, he's living as a fugitive, davening this way nonetheless about all of the Jewish people. A care for all of Klal Yisrael, even as something very bad is transpiring. And I think there's really something something there for our consideration about what it means that the greatness of leadership at a time like this, to be able to speak favorably, I guess, about the Jewish people, or to offer some kind of contrition for Klal Yisrael, even though the truth is it was of their own making. It was of their own making. So when you could just consider what that means, I think is telling, if you will, about the character of a David HaMelech, and worthy of our consideration in terms of how we're going to view the actions of David moving forward here vis-a-vis his enemies. I mean, after all, he did dispatch the troops to go get Avshalom, to stop him in his tracks. Yet, it is something to consider that Chazal wants to know, he still cares about the nation, even though there's a national crisis, and frankly, a national crisis of terrible insurrection, I guess, a terrible lack of regard for all things related to his role as the king. And yet he still has this perspective on what it means to be the leader and to care about Klal Yisrael. Okay. Now,
Rabbi.
Yes. Hi.
Going back to verse 4, when and it says Hamelach says to them, okay, they're saying about not going forth, but his language, whatever is best in your eyes, I shall do, is could be considered very prophetic, could be considered as whatever you do in the battle. And he only tells Yoav, Abishai, and Ittai to be careful with Avshalom. So basically, couldn't I argue that as the king, as the leader, he's giving permission to whatever has to be done to stop this rebellion?
I want to agree with you, but look at the end of verse 5. Keep reading verse 5.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, all the officers?
V'chol ha'am shamu, the whole nation heard, b'tzavot hamelech et kol hasarim al dvar Avshalom. Everybody heard. He was very public when the king commanded all of the officers or ministers with regard to Avshalom. So the Navi was out to tell you everybody did know, kid gloves, don't do something to my boy.
Okay, well, that wouldn't necessarily be the troops, so that would just be the officers. Or do you think the officers then went and told everybody, leave Avshalom alone?
I think that's the assumption. Although it's going to be moot when we get to what actually happens to Avshalom. It's moot because you're going to see.
I'm just trying to understand David.
Yeah, maybe he's conflicted, but also when he said verse 4, you need to, when it says that the king listened, whatever you think is good, I'm going to do, is really because they told him to stay back. Verse 2, pasuk bet, he says, I'm coming. And in verse 3, they say, don't come. Because if something happens to us, doesn't matter. If you get killed, that's not good. That's the end of everything. We lose everything. In pasuk Daled, David says, okay, whatever you think is best, regarding what had just happened before.
Right, but you said that the words of Tzaddikim have consequences that they might not even realize. So.
Excellent. I didn't know that you were already referencing back to what I said. Good.
Yeah, I'm going back with that
there was something paradoxical in what he was saying. I mean, I don't want to say ambivalent. It's his son, but he's caught maybe between being the king and being the dad, and both of these things are playing one off the other. Yeah.
So, Rabbi,
yeah,
I know that every translation is an interpretation.
It is.
But in English, mine says, all the troops heard the king give the orders about Avshalom to all the officers.
Interesting. It depends how you translate the word am. Am in English means nation or people, but there your translation says troops, means all the soldiers knew.
All the troops heard give the orders to all the officers.
Excellent. That's great. Okay. I'm just chewing on that. Because now, okay, we'll see what happens now. We're going to come to a conscientious objector in a minute.
That's explaining the word hasarim. That's not am.
Oh no, but it said true. That sarim, I think, in that translation is officers. Debbie, did it say officers and troops separate?
No, it says all the troops heard the king give the order about Avshalom to all the officers.
So in that translation, which is an interpretation, it's troops and officers. But I think Shelley's point is still well taken, all the people. It does say, although in verse 4, V'chol ha'am refers to all the people who are going, and hundreds and thousands of them are going. Pasuk Daled, it says, V'chol ha'am yatzu l'me'ot v'la'alafim. Okay, let me move to the next slide over here, the next piece. And the next piece here will seem like it's dithering about this topic. It's helping us understand it better, but I'm setting you up for something. So just beware, I'm setting you up. I'll come to it in a minute. But first, let's look at Reb Tzadok HaKohen Milublin, his pre-Tzadik to Parshat Naso. We have the bracha, the Birkat Kohanim, Yar Hashem panav elecha. May God shine His countenance upon you. Hu neged matnat hachachma. Shekidiita b'medrash she'ir einecha v'libcha b'torah. The Medrash describes it's the gift of wisdom. That God should enlighten you, illuminate your mind, your eyes, and your heart with Torah. Omnam shalifamim gam mechachman haTorah lo yavo mimenu lahaseichel. Whoops, sorry. Everyone sees this? It's like a really important line. Sorry. Nope. Third time's a charm. Bingo. I'm highlighting it because this is one, you guys, this is one for the ages. Omnam shalifamim, often even from the wisdom of the Torah, a person will not come to true understanding and to know me, says God. Your brain is not going to be enough, and your knowledge of Torah will not necessarily be enough to save you from terrible mistakes. Next page. Kasher yishal ish bidvar Elokim. Kain leDavid v'chein la'Avshalom. Remember, Achitophel never gets it wrong. He always is the perfect counselor. Chemod yita b'Yerushalmi. Shamar lo leich se'ab orim v'tumim timtza mechuvanim b'kidvarai. That the Achitophel would say, go ask the Urim v'Tumim if what I said is correct. You'll see that I'm right. Ki atzatoa pi haTorah hayu mechuvanim l'ruach hakodesh gam le'Avshalom. Because his counsel using Torah was connected, related through divine inspiration, also regarding Avshalom. Gam be'etza bo el pilak shei avicha hayat tova lefi derech Avshalom. So even the counsel, and he told him to go be with the concubines of his father, it was correct based on the path of Avshalom. Aval la'asher she'etzem chochmato lo hayta lavo mizeh lehaskel v'yadoa lachein ne'evad al yedei zeh min ha'olam. However, the truth is that the essence of his wisdom was not meant to have coming from it that which was true understanding and knowledge. Kemo she'ne'emar v'yitzav el beito v'yechanek. As it says, he commanded his household, and then he was strangled. He strangled himself. But Valzeh Omer, it's with regard to this that we say V'chuneka. Ya'er Hashem panav elecha V'chuneka. That's the bracha. May God illuminate your face and give you chen. She'achachma v'adivrei Torah yu lecha limitziat chen. Shenet v'chulei. Kemo shene'emar ki livyat chen heim l'roshecha. A garland of beauty, of grace, shall it be for your head. And that is what the bracha, Ya'er Hashem panav elecha v'chuneka, means. You could have the illumination even of Torah, but it doesn't mean that you're getting closer to actually knowing the Dvar Hashem if it is not with chen. It requires still a bracha. To say it differently, being smart and having accumulation of knowledge is not enough. You also need siyata deshmaya, divine help and assistance to get it right in terms of what it is that Hashem wants to see happen, if you will. Otherwise, even a great Torah sage could make a huge mistake. Huge mistake. You could see things, and those things may be related even to Ruach HaKodesh, but they still are not correct. You're not seeing them as you ought to see them. And right here, you can see, I'm asking you to please turn back in your Tanakh to the book of Bamidbar, to chapter 16. It'll look pretty familiar to most of us when we get there. Pretty familiar. We're going to learn some Chumash today. You get a twofer. We're learning both about the story of the Mered of Avshalom, and in the same day, just in time for our upcoming Parshat Shavua, let's learn Parshat Korach, a Mered, the first actual Mered that took place in Jewish history, where actually, we learn in a very strange way that there is a concerted effort to replace leadership by the claim, you are yesterday's news. And perhaps your rulership was legitimate, was not legitimate, but the fact is you've overstayed your welcome. You don't belong here. Yeah. So we're just going to take matters into our own hands and do what needs to be done to save. I mean, that's the basic idea, right? That's the basic approach of Korach. So we don't have time to read the whole parsha together, but I wanted to pull out two salient points that I think are going to be instructive for us in terms of our understanding of its significance, to understanding the rebellion of Avshalom. if you look at the beginning of the section, I assume most people are familiar with the basic story of what happens involving Korach and Moshe and Korach and his people. But you just can scan your eye through the English. They basically say that their claims, the reasons why Moshe doesn't deserve to be in charge, and they are getting into a discussion, or at least Korach leading the discussion, some discussion. It's really, they're looking to poke holes and make fights with Moshe and with Aaron and with the regnant leadership. But at a certain point, Moshe turns to them and points out to them that they've just gone too far afield. Look at verse 7. It should be on page 180 in the Koren Tanakh. 180 in the Koren Tanakh. And it's Moshe talking to Korach. Tells them what they're going to do with the Ketores and the whole thing. And then he says at the end, Rav lachem b'nei Levi. What you're doing now, you're overreaching. Many of us are familiar with, and if you're not familiar with, here's Rashi on that pasuk. Look with me on the screen. Okay? Now, Rav lachem b'nei Levi, says Rashi, Davar gadol amarti lachem, I told you, it's now something very, very significant. What did Moshe tell Korach? We'll find out tomorrow who God is going to choose. I'm not saying it's me. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's you. We're going to come with the fire pans and we'll find out. V'lo tipshim hayu, shekach hitra b'hem v'kiblu aleim lekarev. They weren't fools, these people. They understood that Moshe just warned them, and they accepted they're going to do it anyway. Elohim chatu al nafshotam, they sinned with regard to their spirits. Shenemar maftar chataim ha'ila bin nafshotam. They, with their lives, they put their lives at risk. Asks Rashi from the Medrash Tanchuma, V'korach shepikeach haya, ma ra'a lishtut zeh. Korach was a pikeach. A pikeach means a wise person. He's a smart guy. How did he fall into this? Answer, his eye caused him to err. Eino hitato. His vision was the mistake. What was that vision? Ra'ah shalshal gdula yotza mimenu. He saw a great legacy, a great chain, a shalshelet that was going to emerge and emanate from him. And he did not realize what he was seeing. And so he messed it up. What's that shalshel gdolah? Shmuel sheshakul keneged Moshe v'Aaron. There would be later a man named Shmuel who would be as against Moshe and Aaron in terms of his level. Amar, he said to himself, Bishvilo ani nimlat. On account of him, I will be saved in this case. Because I can't die, because if I die, who's this great Shmuel going to come from? 24 orders of Leviim that will be part of the service in the Beit HaMikdash, not yet built, obviously, and they will all have Ruach HaKodesh. Shenamar kol eila banim leheman. Here, it's the list from Divrei Yamim, 24 units worth. Amar, he said to himself, Efshar kol hagdula hazot atida la'amod mimani v'ani edom. Do you think that all this greatness is going to emanate from me, and I'm just going to sit quietly now and not do anything? And that's the word, that's the problem. In the future, it was going to be that way. But he said, to use the expression, we want Shmuel now, and we don't want to wait. Lekach nishtatif lavo le'otah chazaka. That's how he came to this point. Sheshamami pi Moshe shekulam ovdim ve'echad nimlat. What did he hear in Moshe's words? Moshe said, God will choose the one he is going to choose tomorrow morning. The one. Korach decided, who's the one? Me. Who isn't it? It's not anybody else. Asher yivchar Hashem hu hakadosh. Ta'a v'tala be'atzmo. He put it on himself. V'lo ra'a yafeh. He didn't see it correctly. Lefi shebanav asu tshuva. Because his children were going to do tshuva, not him. As it'll tell us in Parshat Pinchas, uvnei Korach lo metu. When you open the book of Tehillim, you have David HaMelech, you have Moshe Rabbeinu is mentioned, you have Eitana Ezrachi. Everybody else, if it has an authorship, there's one Li Shlomo, pretty much the rest of the Sefer is Lamnatzech Livnei Korach Mizmor. Asaf, Heman, Yedutun. And what happens here? Moshe saw correctly. Moshe Hayaro'eh. A question of vision. And a more nuanced understanding of this is that Korach is a brilliant man. And Korach has greatness embedded within him. But even though it says it's in the future, he says, why should I wait now? I want it now. I don't want to wait. Yeah? V'lo ra'ah yafeh. He didn't see correctly. U'Moshe hayaro'eh. Moshe was the visionary, the one who saw. Doesn't that remind us of what we just saw here about Achitofel, what we just learned in the Kohen from Lublin? You could be a brilliant Torah scholar, but you still need a bracha. Ye'er Hashem panav elecha. That's the gift of the Chachma of the Torah. But what do you also need in order for it to work? You're also going to need the tefillah, v'al zeh omer v'yichuneka. That whatever it is that you have in your Torah knowledge should actually be related to Metziat Chen. And if you don't have that, it's not going to work. Karen, please go ahead.
Rabbi, I'm not bringing this up to really discuss it, but everything that you said, I couldn't help thinking of David and Bathsheba, where he had Ruach HaKodesh, there's his Beshert, but he didn't get the timing part right.
That you could bring up. I was just saying I don't want someone to come back and try to
No. Okay.
Today. Well, what about Bathsheba? But yeah, right.
Exactly. Everything that you said, it's like,
Right.
whoa, same thing.
And that's where you see it here.
Yeah.
That's where you see that's in Korach. Rashi wants you to know Korach wasn't a fool, and Korach wasn't without greatness inherent within him. He just said, of course it's now, because I see there's a future for us in greatness.
Right.
And I see that there's going to be almost, it's not exactly a parity because the generations are different, but Shmuel and his generation was like the Moshe and the Aaron of their generation. Now I must point out, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and also with David modeled the other way around when he was trying to run from Saul. He had the vision, he was going to be the king, he knew it, but he didn't grab it. He waited for it to play out. So you saw with him both sides of what you're talking about.
Hold that exact thought, because I'm gonna bring that back up in a few psukim if we get there.
You're chill today.
No, this is great, but this is perfect. This is perfect.
Okay.
This is perfect. Wait, but I wanted to say something as we go to the next piece. If Korach, his eye didn't see correctly, and he was a prisoner of his dreams. He was a prisoner not of his prophetic dreams, of his Ruach HaKodesh. You see it Achitofel also. It's not that he had no merit and he was a wicked guy from the beginning. This developed. He fell off the rails at a certain point. It wasn't always that way. And contrast all of this with Moshe Rabbeinu. Look in the story now, page 180. I'm still in Parshat Korach. Look at what it describes, that all of the people came and converged upon Moshe and Aaron via Pasuk Yutet, Vayakhel aleim Korach el kol ha'ida el petach ol moed, Vayirak vor Hashem el kol ha'ida. In English, Korach congregated upon them, meaning upon Moshe and Aaron, the entire assembly at the opening, the gate of the tent of the meeting. And the glory of God was then seen to all of the people. El kol ha'ida. Vayidaber Hashem, verse 20. Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Aaron lemor. 21. Ki badlu mitoch ha'eda hazot va'achale otam kiraga. Separate yourselves from this assembly, from this congregation. I will destroy them right now in an instant. And the ambiguity is, who's the Eidah? Adat Korach, Korach's Eidah, Korach's followers, or what's said in verse 19, Et Kol Ha'Eidah, all of the people. How do I know this is ambiguous? Because Moshe and Aaron thought it was ambiguous. Look at the next pasuk. Vayiplu apneihem vayamru, El Elohei Ruchot L'chol Basar. Ha'ish echad yechetav al kol ha'Eidah tiktsof. God is the God of all spirits, of all spirits of all creatures. Will one man sin and you get angry at the entire Eidah? You have to realize Moshe and Aaron have already been attacked. As the Chet of the Meraglim was already strike 3. There was already, this is already strike 4. There was already at Parshat Ba'alotcha, the Mitonanim, and the Kivrot Ta'ava, the whole thing with the meat, right? And then you had the Meraglim, that's strike 3. There was 2 things there in Ba'alotcha. One of them is already in Parshat Shlach. And now number 4, this group comes and says, we're done with you. And all the people seem to be in the rebellion already with Korach. Look with me at Rashi, Pasuk Chav Bet. Kel ruchot yodeh machshavot. You know all thoughts. Ein midatcha kimidat basar v'dam. Your attributes are not those of flesh. Melech basar v'dam shesar chalav miktzat medina. Eino yodeh miachotei. For some of the territory under the control of the king, the kings of flesh and blood, if some of them engage in rebellion, the king has no idea who's actually behind it. Therefore, when he gets angry, he has to take exact punishment from all of them. Aval ata, but you, God, lefanecha gluyot kol hamachshavot, you know all of the thoughts. You know exactly who the sinner is. Isolate just the sinner. Please don't punish everyone for the sins of the few. Only one man sinned. You're going to be angry at everybody? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yafeh Marta. You spoke correctly. Good. Git gezukt. You said it the right way. Ani yodea umodia mi chata umi lo chata. I know who sinned, and I'll proclaim who sinned, who didn't sin. And if you look at the next pasuk, verse 23, back in the Chumash, separate yourselves from Korach and his people, and Atan Aviram. Meaning, God allowed the rest of the nation to save itself if they would want to save themselves. How? Get out of the way. Something terrible is about to happen. Follow? Now, isn't this little dialogue here in Rashi? Bain is really based on the pasuk, the way that they davened, Moshe and Aaron davened, just like what we saw when we started today, that even though Achitophel did wrong, even though he had done something terrible, nonetheless, David HaMelech is davening for the Jewish people. And therein is the greatness of the leader who is still, even now, bowing down before God and saying, "We're Hashem, we know we're not doing right by you, but thank you for everything you've done and everything you've given us."
Rabbi, there's a difference, though, between Korach and Achitophel and Moshe and David.
Yeah, many differences.
What I know, but this idea of Ruach HaKodesh, or the kind of wisdom. David was told he's going to be king by a prophet who hears it from God. That's much more direct. Moshe spoke to God face to face. If these guys, Achitophel and Korach, had some kind of spark or divine wisdom, it's not that clear. It's never that clear. How could you? And we don't even have that nowadays. So this idea that what we're supposed to learn from this kind of stuff is, how can you learn anything from when you don't have it? When the people who had somewhat of it were still arrogant enough to think that they knew everything. So basically, you better not think that God's talking to you.
They were human, and they weren't perfect, and far from perfect in some cases, farther from perfect in other cases. That's why we have to be careful, even when we're reading certain nevuot, to say, what are we doing to bring them about? And yet, what are we doing that is perhaps, on a certain level, arrogating to ourselves, being locked into what we think is the interpretation of those prophetic words? It is a question. It's unresolved.
Rabbi, I don't think it's any coincidence that Moshe, who is the greatest prophet, is always referred to as the most humble of men.
Right.
He was able to make himself transparent.
Yeah.
Okay, whereas everybody else pretty much, even if they're getting prophecy, it's being filtered through their self. Their self is still there. So you're going to have Moshe, who's in a class by himself, and then everybody else who's got a little bit of mud in the water. That makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, that's what Chazal say, that all of the prophets saw ba'aspaklaria she'ena me'ira, means they saw prophecy as if through a somewhat opaque looking glass. But Moshe Rabbeinu saw through an aspaklaria ha'me'ira, means one that was completely transparent.
Oh, cool! I came up with
that. But you know, and I think your point is well taken. And Shelley's question, however, still stands at a certain level. It leads one to doubt, like, what am I projecting into this nevuah or this aspect of what I think is supposed to happen in Jewish history, and when does it go too far? It's an open question. But at least
one more thing, Rabbi.
Yeah, please.
You said that Achitophel's advice about the to Avshalom to take the concubines was not wrong. Okay.
In theory, it was not wrong. Hold on. In theory, it wasn't wrong. It means there was some kernel of this is what was supposed to happen in some way. You know, in the sense of, you know, he said, well, I have a Ruach HaKodesh. But clearly he didn't, whatever he was supposed to see, he didn't see correctly because he gave him this horrendous advice that in the end was incredibly sinful.
Wouldn't halacha be so obvious that you can't do this, thing, that's one of the things you're supposed to die for, is immorality. They're married to the king, and it's rebellion to, I mean, it's just, this is one case where the advice, how on earth could you use Ruach HaKodesh to justify something that's so against halacha?
I don't know. And that's why, and that's where we see in the end, Achitophel off the rails, Avshalom off the rails. Bad things resulted. Bad things resulted. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to say. You know, I don't know.
Rabbi?
Helen, please go ahead.
Yes. Okay, this is kind of crazy. Yaakov is leaving his family way behind when he meets Esav, so he's thinking about collateral damage. Now, when David is taking all these people, does he have any option of collateral damage and bloodless rebellion in any option that he could have taken? In his earlier years, he used hiding in caves and all kinds of things. Of course, Avshalom was already sitting on the throne. It makes it very different.
Yeah.
But still have to think about collateral damage. Because even today with Hiroshima, we rethink and rethink, was there any other way to stop the war? We still feel guilty about the innocent people burning on the street. So collateral damage here is something David should have thought about before the Mageifa.
Again, in retrospect, in hindsight, all those questions, okay, but not while it's happening. Not while it's happening.
So he has no other choice at this moment.
Everything's swirling. He's running. That's why I said to look up Tehillim chapter 3. Again, it's in the Koran Tanakh, page 728. Because when you look up that chapter, you remind yourself, because we saw it already weeks ago, this is the tefillah, not written down in Sefer Shmuel Bet, written in David HaMelech's Siddur. Mizmor David Bavarchim Mipnei Avshalom Beno. And this is sort of the signature tefillah of his time. And he's talking here, if you read through it again, there are tens of thousands of people who are trying to come after him. And he's davening that his enemies should be struck What's interesting is his enemies should be struck on the cheek. So you need a froskin punim to break the teeth of the wicked ones. I don't say they should die. And is there an unintended consequence of what happened? Yeah, there's always unintended consequences. I mean, what should I say? Well, it's true. But I think also...
But look how smart Yaakov was. He put them way behind. He understood.
And in the end, Esav got there too.
Right.
Hard to know. Let's table it with a lot of question marks. I don't know what to say.
Okay.
Look at verse 9, chapter 3 in Tehillim, verse 9. Right after he talks about tens of thousands of people who are chasing him, coming after him, and are trying to destroy him, he asked that Hashem should save him and hit my enemies across the face and break their teeth. By the way, the breaking of teeth is not necessarily literally the breaking of teeth. It could be you're hitting someone in the face as it causes breaking of teeth, but the breaking of teeth, when someone's teeth are broken, it also means that they have nothing that they can say. As in the expression, this Aramaic is so hard to read, I'm breaking my teeth over it. You're not literally breaking your teeth, it's an expression. So it could be read as smack them across the face and make them be quiet, get them to shut up in their terrible things that they're saying. What's the last pasuk tat? A man who's on the run, who has every reason to be embittered by a nation that did not support him in his hour of need. Of course, in the end they did, but when he's running away, what does he still say? L'Hashem ha'Yeshua al amcha birchatecha sela. The davening for David HaMelech is always again and again about the nation. Even if the real picture is a lot more nuanced than this idealized view of the people. But he still held that ideal. I'm saying even as he's running away, from Hashem comes salvation. Will your bracha should be upon your nation. Now, you could read this, of course, as your nation, meaning your nation who's with me and not with them. Okay, but I think to me, the way we usually read it in davening is Hashem ha'Yishua Olamcha b'Chatecha Sel. We say it in Havdalah. It's in the davening in the morning. The idea that Hashem should send his bracha to all of Klal Yisrael. All of Klal Yisrael. Okay.
Rabbi?
Oh, hi. How are you? Nice to see you.
Hi, this is Danny Novik. How are you?
Hi, Danny. I see you. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't know if you see me. I wanted to mention something. Rosalie's father once mentioned to me, Chazal Silverstein, a gematria about the word pikeach in Rashi. Pikeach comes out to be 188, and shalom comes out to be 376. So if you take shalom and divide it in half, you get 188. You get pikeach. So what was his genius? His genius was in taking shalom and breaking it in half.
Thank you very much. We'll remember that for Parshat Korach.
Yeah.
Parshat Korach. That's great. That's great.
That was his genius. And
very
some
nice.
people have a genius in different things, and he was...
And that's what he had. That's what he had.
He
Yeah.
was breaking shalom.
Interesting.
He had peace, but he didn't.
Okay. Thank you. Good.
Yes.
Okay.
Rabbi, one more thing.
Please.
V'shinantum levanecha v'hakei es shinov. It's just straighten somebody out, you might say. Not really harm them, but straighten them out, or insist upon a certain way of behavior.
That's what it means.
Yeah. So no killing.
Right, exactly. It didn't have to be through killing. Right. It didn't have to be. Didn't have to be. Right. Okay, I have a few minutes left. I want to see something else. Is that all right? Let's move on. Everybody with me? Look with me at this Gemara. We already saw this Gemara. So I didn't even give you the translations. We saw it already. This is, now I'm going to teach you something which I would consider to be somewhat speculative. But I think there's something to it. I think this is the story in the Gemara where Shaul sees a young David out on the battlefield, David felling Goliath, And the discussion then, as is described in the Gemara, of the question that is being asked by Shaul, is he worthy of royalty? In some way asking, like, is he a threat to me? So Doeg is in the Beit Midrash, says the Gemara Masachet Yevamot, and says, before you ask if he's appropriate for Malchut, why don't you ask if he's appropriate to even be a Jew? Because he actually came from Ruth HaMoaviyah. So he's not really part of us. He's not one of us. And then the discussion back and forth, Moaviv lo Moaviyah, that only a male Moabite may not convert, but a female may convert, and the back and forth there. Now, who is the individual who quelled the discussion? Who is it that helped them figure out that it was incorrect that one should try to understand the rejection of Moavi, male members of the Moabite nation, to include the females? Who set everyone straight? It's described here. They wanted to make an announcement that David is not really Jewish because his father's mother's mother is Ruth HaMoaviyah. Miyad, immediately, it's from a parak before of Amasa ben Ish ushmo Yitra Yisraeli asher ba el Avigail bat Nachash. And Shali had asked me some weeks ago, who's Nachash? The Ammoni? Uchtiv, and it says Yeter HaYishmaeli. So in other words, it describes this individual in Amasa. We'll look at the pasuk in a minute, but it calls him Yeter Yishmaeli in one place, and Yitra here is called the Yisraeli in another place, who came to Avigail, Bat Nachash. So Amar Rav Melamed, it teaches us Shechiger Charbo ki Yishmael, that he did as the way of the Ishmaelites, and he put on his sword. Amar, and he declared, Kol mi she'ena shemei halacha zu yidake b'cherev. Anyone who doesn't listen to the following halacha will be stabbed by a sword. Kach mikublani beit dino shel Shmuel haramati amoni v'lo amonit moavi v'lo moavit. So he said, I learned the following from the Beit Din of Shmuel from Ramah, that it means Ammoni and cannot convert, but an Ammonite may convert. That a Moavi may not convert, but a Moavite may convert. Now, these little psukim over here, this Amasa ben Ish, if you look back in Shmuel, back in Shmuel Bet, page 380, whatever it is, 386. 387. I made a mistake. 387. I want us to get the family story straight here. Look at verse 25, page 387. I'm in Shmuel Bet, chapter 17, verse 24 and 25. V'David ba Machanaima, v'Avshalom avar et HaYarden, hu v'chol ish Yisrael imo. V'et Amasa, sam Avshalom tachat Yoav, al hatzava. So Amasa was placed as the head of Avshalom's army. Who is Amasa? Amasa ben Ish, ushmo Yitra Yisraeli, asher ba'al Avigail bat Nachash, achot Tzuya em Yoav. So who is Amasa? Amasa, the head of Avshalom's army, the chief of staff, we find out is the son of Yitra, who is a Jew. Here he's called Yisraeli, and the Yerushalmi will be called Yishmaeli. That's the pasuk on your screen. And it describes that, in fact, he was the individual, this person, Yitra, who stood up in the Beit Midrash in the days of Shaul and defended that the house of David is legitimate. So that guy's son is Amasa, who's now the head of the army of Avshalom. I have more to say. Wait, before you ask, okay? Just want you to have this lineup. There's more. Wait, not turn to the Nachash part. Says the Gemara in Masechet Baba Bachit of Yud Zayin Amid Aleph. Tanu Rabbanan. Tanu Rabbanan. Our sages taught there are 4 individuals who died only on account of one thing, the etyo shel nachash, the venom of the viper. What is that referring to? There are 4 people who basically were free of sin, but they died because of the fact that there was, quote unquote, injected into every human being the venom of the primordial snake, which was death. Remember? Chava eats from the fruit, Adam eats from the fruit, and the punishment was the day you eat from it, you will die. So there are those who interpret it means the day you eat from it, death will be a possibility. So people who are sin-free, nonetheless, they could die in this way. What's that? Because all human beings are finite. Binyamin ben Yaakov, Amram aviv Moshe, Yishai aviv David, V'kilav ben David. V'kulu Gemara, Labar mi Yishai aviv David, Mefarish Beikra, Dichtiv, Vet Amasa, Sam Avshalom, Tachet Yoav al Tzava, Amasa ben Ish, Ushmo Yitra Yisraeli, Asher Baal Avigail bat Nachash, Achot Surya em Yoav. V'chi bat Nachash, is she the daughter of the Nachash? Halo bat Yishai he. She's the daughter of Yishai. Who's the daughter of Yishai? Avigail is the name of one of the daughters of Yishai. Tichtiv, Vachoteim Tzeruya v'Avigail Ella bat mi shemet be'etyo shel Nachash. She's the daughter of one who died only on account of the snake, but who would not have otherwise died. Who's that? Yishai, the father of David. Now, in case this is confusing to you, because it was confusing to me, look up Divrei Hayamim, which in case there's a lot of page flipping and you're new to the Shir and saying, why is he flipping pages? The answer is because Tanakh is informing itself all the time, and this sheds light on it. Look at Divrei Hayamim Aleph, chapter 2 with me. Flip there quickly, because we're running short on time, but just to see this inside, hopefully it'll be illuminating. Divrei Hayamim Aleph, chapter 2. Divrei Hayamim, the book of Chronicles, mostly focused on the Malchut of Yehuda, and therefore it gives you, chapter 1 is literally from Adam HaRishon. The first word in the book of Divrei Hayamim is not accidentally Adam. Adam, Shet, Enosh, because it's giving you the names, the names. So buried in chapter 2, verse 15, we get the family tree. We learn all of the, we could go back to verse 9. Uvnei Chetzron, who's Chetzron? From Sheva Yehuda. Shnolad lo et Rachmeel vet Ram vet Kluvi. Ram holid et Aminadav, Aminadav holid et Nachshon, Nasib b'nei Yehuda. Nachshon holid et Salma, the Salma holid et Boaz. Boaz holid et Oved. Boaz married to Ruth. He has a son named Oved. Oved holid et Ishai. The Ishai holid et Bechorot Eliav, Vinadav, Hasheni, V'shima Shlishi, Tanor Revi'i, Radai Chamishi, Otzem Hashishi, David Hashvi'i. And they have a sister. What is her name? Tzeruya. And another sister named Avigail. Uvenei Tzeruya, the sons of Tzeruya, the daughter, are Avshai, V'Yoav, V'Asael, Shlosha, V'Avigail, Yaldaet Amasa, V'Avi Amasa, Yeter HaYishme'eli. If what I've just done is successful, it should be like they say in Hebrew, Nafal Ha'asimon. It's dropped into the machine. You hear the quarter going through the machine. It's the Price is Right Plinko. Oh no. So listen to this. Yishai has 2 daughters. This is not Midrashim. This is the Pshat. Yishai has 2 daughters, Tzeruya and Avigail. The reason why Yoav is called Yoav ben Tzeruya, even though it's his mother's name, is because knowing his father's name doesn't tell us any information. But knowing his mother's name reminds us that Yoav's grandfather, his Zayda, is Yishai. And David is not just his employer, it's his uncle. It also tells us that Amasa, who was now the new chief of staff by the newly vacated position of the chief of staff of the king of Israel, since now the new pretender to the throne is Avshalom, who does he appoint? Yoav ben Tzeruya's cousin, this guy, Amasa, who is of the line of Avigail, right? Avigail gave birth to Amasa. And who's Avigail? Avigail is Tzeruya's sister. And Tzeruya and Avigail have a brother whose name is David. And you see how enmeshed everything is. It is, in some ways, Lahav Avdolot, it's La Familia over here. the whole family. And now Avshalom has his chief of staff from one sister's son, and David has the Tseruyas. Why could he never get rid of the Tseruyas? For many reasons. One of them is it's mishpacha. Now, when you understand all of that, and if you look here, Rashi and Divrei Yamim actually tells you, "Achyotem Tzeruya v'Avigail mipnei kvodo shel David shayu bnei achoto giborim v'anshei chayil v'sarim kach mefurash." Rashi just tells you, for the honor of David, it tells you the sisters' names because his nephews were all great warriors and great ministers, great people. Shelley, go ahead.
Rabbi, it just dawned on me. Why are we wondering whether David is Jewish or not? It doesn't matter about Ruth. That's on his father's side. If the idea is it comes from the mother's side, Debbie said what the mother's name was. Was it something Misevet?
Yeah, Midrashim.
So why? It doesn't matter. He's Jewish because his mother was Jewish. So why is the Gemara going into all of this unless there's somehow there was some kind of patrilineal descent like is claimed by certain denominations now, which we don't buy.
If his mother, right? I think it's not literally a disqualifier for him to be Jewish, as much as the question of once someone in the line. According to Doeg, once someone in the line had intermarried with someone from Moab who's not allowed to be part of the nation, that person should be held at arm's length and cannot be admitted into the people, regardless of patrilineal or matrilineal elements. It's that the descendants of anyone who's from Moab should be held as verboten, held at arm's length, pushed away, cast aside. And that's why the expression...
That's not,
But that's what the expression of the Gemara is. Here. She'al alav imroi lavo bikal imlav. You know what? I made a mistake. I said, is he Jewish or not? That's not really the right statement. It's really, is he allowed to be part of the kahal or not? Because the pasuk of the kahal means of the community, the congregation. Because in Sefer Devarim, where you have this prohibition, right, that they may not come bikahal Hashem, it means that no matter how many generations have passed, anyone who's descended of someone from Moab, a man from Moab, may never be part of the Jewish people. So it's not about his yichus status, is he a Jew or not, is he in some other separate class of these people don't belong with us? Like the case of a mamzer.
Like a mamzer, okay.
Ela me'ata mamzer, v'lo mizutum mamzer k'tiv, mum zar. Yeah, so discussion. Okay, whatever. But the idea of mamzer is connected to it. Let's just finish today. Now that we see all of this, percolating and going and moving and shifting, and it's so challenging. Let's say in closing, if there can be ever a closing to these discussions, because it's so what's the word? So painful just to even to try to understand what's going on with these people and their family, and it's like it's not really it doesn't seem to be too advantageous to be part of this family. There's a lot of people dying, a lot of people with sad, terrible things, but now we also understand how things come in a tragic way, full circle for Avshalom. Here he is hanging, suspended between heaven and earth. And as we'll see next time, he's actually going to be killed in a very harsh way, and we'll get to that, shortly. But just to say that there was something about the fact that he was suspended, his hair got stuck in that place, that should give us pause and should make us think a little bit about why that might be. I'm actually going to leave it for next time, so we don't have time to already. I see what time it is. I don't want to start going into it now, but we should try to think a little bit. Why is it so significant? We're going to hear actually how he's going to be killed, how he's going to die. It's so tragic and sad, and to realize that there's not just the enmeshment now of his hair caught that way, but there's so much enmeshment with the whole family. The two generals fighting each other are first cousins. It's David's nephew, who's his chief of staff, and it's his another nephew who's against him. It's his son who's against him, and you just marvel at it. And I think again about that image that we had talked about previously. We actually saw on the screen last time of what that tree that looks so entangled and so stuck and rolled in itself that it looks tortuous just to lay your eyes on it. You think this is the symbol in a way of what transpired. So one commentator, more modern commentator, said it's almost like the ram with its head stuck in the thicket. That's the image that you have. Of course, it didn't play out the same way, and it wasn't exactly an Akedah, but you still have that image. This is the picture. That's the Elah. That's what it looks like, right? So it's got these, and he's stuck in it. And the one in the background has the leaves still attached. This is more the brambles and the trunk of it. That's the craziness of it all. We'll come back to this, God willing.
Rabbi, you're talking about the Parsha of Korach. Korach is the cousin of Moshe and Aaron. So This is just a replay of that story.
In certain ways, perhaps it is. In certain ways, perhaps it isn't. But I was going to save it for next time, but I'll just say that there is some kind of idea, we'll see it next time, that when Avshalom is suspended between heaven and earth, that he sees stretched out, opened before him, the gates of Gehenna. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. I wish everyone a great rest of the day. Sei gesund. Next week, we'll pick up with this again and learn a little more about Avshalom, his hair, and his tragic end, and of course the aftermath and its implications for David HaMelech and for Klal Yisrael. Ad Kan for today.